All right, it is 6 p.m.
Recording in progress.
on Monday, May 1st. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Winooski Liquor Control Board. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Councilor Oakley.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, Jenny, please join us. We have liquor control license applications and entertainment permits.
Yes. So the entertainment permits we brought up last week, about 4 quarters, but we've had some, I reached out to some who had them last year, and so they wanted the entertainment permit for the year. So these are renewed on an annual basis, and they don't have to have set days. It's $175 for the year. And then the restaurant applications, I just have to add, if I can, that Tiny Thai paid as well. That just came in today.
And then Sour Hall Foods, Wicked Wings, they're pending.
They're pending.
You're just waiting for the
inspection.
state piece?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions from anyone?
Only if there's any complaints, community complaints or any violations
No, I
of
sent
building
them.
code.
No.
Okay. These are all under item A for discussion approval. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bryn, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye. Motion carries. Thank you. That is the end of the Liquor Control Board agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Charlie, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. I will now, it is 6:02 p.m. I will call to order the Winooski City Council meeting. First up is agenda review. Any concerns about the order of the agenda this evening?
No.
Great. Next up is public comment. We have no public comment. No public to comment. We have an attendee, but they're here for an item. Consent agenda. We have our minutes from April 17th, payroll warrant, accounts payable, Memorial Day Parade event permit application, and annual financial plan for town highways. Any questions about any of these items?
I was thinking about removing E just for a little bit more detail on that.
Where would we add that, Elaine?
Oh, good question.
I haven't done
Like
this in a
before
very
it
long
could
time.
Call it no, we can't.
Can we put
Why
it?
don't you make it A1? That way John can be here to explain it.
Okay.
I guess he's staying to the end of today, but
Does anyone else want to, well, you want to make a motion to pull that out of
I would like to
consent?
remove consent agenda item E from, and place it on the regular items.
Second.
Motion by Bryn, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Any questions about any other items? Would someone like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Charlie, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Council reports. Aurora?
Okay, so we were able to reschedule April's Inclusion and Belonging Commission meeting. We held that actually last Thursday, during which we had a really in-depth discussion on what a stipend policy would look like. So Jenny and I kind of wanted to wait until we had that discussion before drafting the policy, and we hope to have that before the council at our next meeting, with all of the items that the Inclusion and Belonging Commission brought up, including thinking about if members are participating in interviews for commission members, like how does that work under the stipend policy. So that was a really great discussion. And we have a new member who the council brought in last time, so she was actually able to attend the April meeting and had some really great contributions. So really excited to have Ruth on board. And that's all I really have for council updates.
Thank you.
Margaret?
Yes, Margaret Bass did resign from the commission. Her term was up at the end of June, but due to personal matters, she felt that she couldn't show up in the way that the commission needed, and so stepped down. So we are looking for a 5th member.
Okay.
But we really, really appreciate the contributions that Margaret has brought to kind of getting this up and off the ground, so.
Thank you.
So we didn't have an infrastructure commission meeting in April due to lack of agenda items. And anticipate holding our next meeting April 18th. Should have a lot more to discuss at that point in time. Green Up Day is this coming Saturday. I'm sure city staff will get into more details, so I'll leave it at that. I'm very excited. And hope to see a lot of people out cleaning up and greening up Winooski on Saturday. So that's it for now.
Thank you. On Thursday, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on updates to parking and incentives for historic preservation, which I had been previewing. They did not advance those to council yet. There had been concerns from one of the local developers that the changes could reduce density. So we asked for more information for the next meeting to understand why this individual was suggesting that, because that wasn't the intention of the changes that were made. So that will happen at their next meeting on May 11th, at which time they may move those, try to advance those changes to City Council. We would hold a public hearing before adopting any new regulation changes. They canceled their second meeting in May. They also looked at a map for a potential design review district, which would add an additional layer of review to the permitting process to any properties within the new district. It's going to be, I think, several months of ongoing discussion, and the borders of that could change, and what exactly would get included in design review also will likely change throughout the discussion process. So more to come on that. We had the event permit application for Memorial Day Parade in the consent agenda. Winooski's annual Memorial Day Parade has not happened in 4 years. The VFW and RVA put that on in partnership and are really excited to bring it back this year. The city staff also participate. They are looking for groups, community groups, people with interesting vehicles, businesses, floats, anyone to participate. Anyone is welcome. It is Saturday, May 27th. Thank you. The parade's at noon. They are also seeking volunteers. You can call the VFW or drop in the day of around 10 or 11. Yeah, and there's a free barbecue meal afterwards. That is it for me.
The Housing Commission will meet Thursday at 6 o'clock. We didn't have quorum last month, so we'll be meeting for my real official first time at that point. So
Excellent.
I'll have more for you next time.
Thank you. City updates.
Yes. It's a long one, so just buckle up. Green Up Day is this Saturday. Please join your neighbors for Green Up Day in Winooski, Saturday, May 6th. You can pitch in and also enjoy this annual tradition, which is statewide, by cleaning up public spaces in the community. Participants can grab their Green Up bags early at Winooski City Hall or the O'Brien Community Center until May 5th. On Green Up Day, stop by the Winooski Senior Center from 8:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. to get your Green Up bags. And you can enjoy light refreshments that are provided by Srome's Cafe. You can also stop by Four Quarters Brewing from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. to get your bags and free hot dog. Staff and volunteers will be available for assistance. Feel free to green up any part of the city. For full event details and guidelines, you can visit winooskivt.gov/greenupday. No spaces or dots or underscores, just Green Up Day, one word. Vacancies. The City of Winooski is searching for engaged and dedicated residents to serve on our boards, commissions, and committees. These opportunities are an excellent way to get involved in the public process. If you're looking to get connected to your neighbors or discover a new way to give back to the community, don't look any further than this opportunity. Applicants with related experience, skill sets, and interests are encouraged to apply. Council and staff welcome diverse voices. If you've never served, we will do our best to support you. Current seat vacancies include the Finance Commission, Inclusion and Belonging Commission, a brand new youth member position for the Winooski Memorial Library Committee, the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission Planning Advisory Committee, the Winooski Valley Parks District Board of Trustees, and the Chittenden Solid Waste District Board of Commissioners. You can learn more about these positions by visiting the News Updates section at winooskivt.gov. On a similar note, the city will have an announcement in the coming weeks advertising our annual board, commission, and committee term expirations, which are right around the corner on June 30. LaFountain Street and Dion Street Local Concerns Meeting. The Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission invites you to attend the first public meeting of the LaFountain Street and Dion Street Scoping Study on Monday, May 8th at 6:30 p.m. at Winooski City Hall. The purpose of the study is to investigate potential street reconfigurations along LaFountain Street and Dion Street, spanning from Main Street to East Allen Street based on public feedback. The public is encouraged to participate in all phases of the study, starting with a local concerns meeting. The goal of the local concerns meeting is to gather input on local concerns, transportation needs, and ideas to develop alternatives. This is an excellent opportunity to share your concerns and suggestions to enhance the corridor. For full project details, please visit the news updates section of winooskivt.gov or visit ccrpcvt.org. And finally, there will be a blood drive at the Senior Center. The Winooski Fire Department is hosting a blood drive in partnership with the American Red Cross at the Winooski Senior Center on Friday, May 19th from 12 to 5:15 p.m. Please consider signing up today. Your donation can save a life. Visit the news updates section on winooskivt.gov to learn more.
Is that all?
That is all.
All right, thank you. So we'll move into regular items, and our new item A is the annual financial plan town highways item from consent agenda. John, can you please give us an overview of what that is?
Sure. Angela's probably on it too. So this is an annual filing requirement with V-Trans that we pull out what we spend for the current year for those categories of road maintenance. So one of the main reasons we do this is we have to do the filing in order to be able to procure any V-Trans grants for the year. But Angela, I don't know if you want to chime in on like how you pull out those funding
Yep,
lines.
so it's based on the FY24 budget data that you approved. We pull out the pieces that are specifically winter maintenance, so primarily overtime and salt and sand. Most other items are considered normal operations. Capital budget, where we are spending tax dollars directly on major capital improvements, are also called out. Basically, the state wants to know that we're spending a certain amount per capita on our roads. We just have to prove that we're spending a certain amount per lane mile. We far exceed the amount that we're required to in order to be eligible for grants.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council?
You mentioned that salt and sand are included, or is line striping included as well?
Yes, that's in the operations line item, not the winter maintenance line item.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was reading through this and appreciated having just some additional context and refreshing my memory from previous years on the reasoning behind it, purpose, and what's included in the estimates. So, thank you.
Would someone like to make a motion to approve the annual financial plan for town highways?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Brent, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks.
We're on to the old item A, the operational overviews discussion. Ray, are you going first?
Yeah.
All right. We'll hear about the Community Services Department first.
And Paul is gonna
Paul's gonna pilot my slides for me. All right. So Paul, you can skip to the next one. So as you've seen throughout, quick snapshot of our staff here, and if you, Paul, can go to the next slide, just a little bit, frankly, for my old eyes, a little bit easier to read the folks that are here. You know, our department is kind of chunked into, I guess, 4 major buckets: recreation and parks, our library, children and family programs, and senior programs. And then there's a youth interventionist and an admin that sort of work across the department in support of all those areas in some way, shape, or form. As you can see, the rec department has a number of seasonal employees, so that's an area where we see a big growth spike in the summer, and then as the weather gets cool again, things quiet down for us and we end up with a lot fewer staff. One thing of note here is that as part of the budget process, we did move from 2 AmeriCorps members, which we are currently supporting. Next year's budget was going to be supporting 1. We found out about a week and a half ago that the agency we get our AmeriCorps members from is not going to be renewing their federal grant next year. So we are hunting around right now for another agency through which to get members and exploring some different options. But I just wanted to give that heads up that that's something we're kind of wrestling with, which was totally out of the blue. I've worked with this agency for 17 years and was shocked. So nothing like a little curveball for us. But I think we'll explore kind of ways that we can backfill that service time if we do run out of options on AmeriCorps. And any questions on the sort of broad constellation of staff, and we can kind of jump into each of the areas specifically.
Just a reminder that we're taking the oversight of the lifeguards in-house this season.
Last season we actually did that for the
Okay.
first time. Yep, and that so the YMCA managed the lifeguards season 1, and last year they were our employees, as were the pool supervisors. So that and you know, nothing against the Y, but I think that
Right.
worked really smoothly, having just everybody under one management structure. So yeah, excited, and we have a lot of people coming back from last year, which is great. Make
Yeah, it's
for a
awesome.
much smoother start to the season, I think. All right, go ahead, Paul. Next slide. So Rec and Parks, you know, within here, we are, you know, not surprisingly, designing and delivering lots of different types of programs. Really, I'm a sucker for a sports metaphor, but I really view Rec and Parks as our center fielder. They're the part of our department that is sort of looking for the gaps and filling those around the other parts of what we do. So it does tend to be programmatically pretty broad and pretty diverse in terms of the offerings. Obviously, with the ESSER influx of resources, we have been very youth focused the last 2.5 years, just because we had a huge injection of resources, but are continuing to try to look at ways to expand opportunities and offerings for adults as well. Also here, you know, Myers Pool obviously is a big lift in the summertime. Managing our parks is something that we are also, you know, in the context of our parks plan, trying to do more and more of, and then seasonal community garden work as well. I put in the bottom there because I didn't really know quite where else to stick it, but the O'Brien Center, there's a lot of management that goes on there, especially around public usage. As we've seen since Northland Studios left, a big need that we're trying as best we can to fill with our staff. So that's definitely been a lift as well. And I do just want to, before I jump to the next slide, there's that second bullet point, just note that we're really focused across our department and making sure that folks' basic needs are met in terms of their ability to just even get to program. As a for instance, we start soccer practice tomorrow for the team I'm coaching. Spent a decent chunk of time today figuring out what size cleats we need to buy for kids, who needs shin guards, how are we getting kids to and from Landry Park. A lot of things that I think other communities perhaps are able to take for granted a bit more. Just to get to soccer practice starting, there's a lot of pieces that we're kind of engaged with our participants. So it's not to say that that's a bad thing. It's just a layer of work that I think goes into being successful in delivering the programs we do. So I just wanted to highlight that. Any questions on recreation and parks?
I want to say it's really cool that you do that. Like you fill those gaps for the kids
Thanks.
because sports, it's
Yeah.
proven over and over, it helps with outcomes. So
Yeah, no, thank you for that. All right, go ahead, Paul.
So library, again, fairly straightforward operationally, at least on the surface. Weekly open hours for the public. A huge expansion of on-site programming in the last 2 years with Nate and Kirsten on staff. So lots of drop-in programming and a real variety, as you can see here. Also a lot of work behind the scenes on collection management. So Kirsten in particular has done a lot of work with our youth collection and really trying to make sure that in our small space, the books that we do have on shelves really reflect what patrons are interested in. And then increasingly trying to look at opportunities for offsite programming as well. So connections with childcare providers, story times up at Thrive. People may have seen the story walk that just went up in Richards Park last week. So really trying to get outside the walls of the library to connect with the community. All right, next slide. I'll just crank through and stop me if you have questions. Winooski Senior Center, again, weekly open hours here. I think one thing that's always important to share is that Senior Center is run by one part-time employee. So we do try to maximize that across the week, but I think certainly would love to see more hours down there as we move into the future that are open to the public. But breakfast cafe, coffee chats, and then at Barb's direction, we've actually the last few years done Fridays at the pool with the senior center, which has been great. We've had upwards of 30 seniors there every Friday morning. We open up for free for seniors during that time. So it's a great opportunity for older residents to get in the water with a cohort that is of their variety, and it's been really cool. And then lots of partnerships too. Again, with a part-time employee running things, we do really try to figure out how to leverage other agencies' programming. So AgeWell, SASH, HANDS, it's like all the acronyms here. A lot of partnerships here in support of bringing resources for our seniors to the community.
I have a question on meal distribution.
Yep.
Do you have a sense for how much of those food, the food provided is locally grown, locally sourced?
It's a great question. I don't. A few years back, AgeWell moved to using a single provider for meals across their whole set of programs. It used to be sort of little intermittent kitchens would be running, producing. And I think at that point, there was a little bit more focus on that perhaps, just from the smaller providers. I could certainly find out. I'm not sure. It's a group that's based out of Rutland that produces the meals now, and then they truck those up every day.
Okay.
So yeah, I can find out. It's a good question. All right, next slide. And then Thrive After School. So again, Claudine's technical title is Children and Family Programs Manager, as she does do work beyond Thrive, but the lion's share of what she's working on is our Thrive program, which is our licensed childcare. So during the school year, we are open 5 days a week from 3 to 5:30 for kindergarten through 5th grade. And then during the summer, we offer, depending on the schedule, about 7 weeks of full day, full week care for that elementary age group as well. As a licensed state program, families that are income eligible are able to receive state support for subsidy to cover the cost of their childcare. And through ESSER, the last 3 summers, we've been able to offer Thrive Summer for free, and have seen huge increases in not only the diversity of our population that we're seeing in the summer program, but also the numbers. So that's something, I think, Bryn, to a question you'd asked a couple weeks ago, we're really looking at as we move towards next summer's planning of 2024, how do we retain that? I think that's really a goal of ours, is to figure that out, because we've really seen in the summer especially that's a huge need. And then again, there's a lot of work that, there's the see it, touch it, sort of very obvious childcare program itself, and then a lot of work behind the scenes to make that go, especially around retaining licensure with the state, and making sure that our families are able to navigate that system. I frequently use an example, but early in the fall, we had a mother in with 2 small children, not an English speaker, and Claudine, who shared a language with this parent, spent about 2.5 hours just to get the application filled out. And that's just the initial application. And then there's subsequent steps, and it's kind of a bear. So I will say I've been excited to see at the state level some language in the bill going through that is really focused on simplifying that process. So, yeah, any questions on Thrive?
Is Thrive After School, is that the programmatic model?
That's the program name.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's Thrive After School and Thrive Summer. So it's the same program, but just different times of year and different durations. All right, next slide. Our youth interventionists, which again, I know we talked a lot about during our budget process, but, and sadly are going to be having a transition in that position pretty soon. Frankie's last day with us is going to be towards the end of this month, but we are about to make an offer to a really exciting candidate, which we're thrilled about. So this position is really looking at working one-on-one with families and children that are struggling and need some extra support. I really like to, kind of frame this more as a resource navigator and case manager. We are not social workers. This is not a trained social worker, but it's somebody that's really there to help connect families and kids with resources to help them kind of take that next step and stay on track.
Yeah, and Ray
Yeah.
talked about during the budget season too, or I think it's come up when I talked with some of the other staff, like this supports the library, it
Yes,
supports
yes.
Parks and Rec.
Yep, and I mentioned at the beginning, this is really a position that works across the department. So we've interdepartmentally done referrals from the rec department to the youth interventionists. We had a kid who was struggling at soccer practice and was getting, aggressive with teammates, and referred that child, who has now just blossomed and is really flourishing. Frankie, our current youth interventionist, often will go and hang in the library during the after school hours and connect with kids there. And she and Kirsten are in touch quite a bit. We've a number of the kids we've served through the youth interventionist also are Thrive customers. So it really is sort of, works across the department. Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Next slide. So current plans or current progress on pieces that were in the policy and policy
Strategies and priorities.
the work plan. I can never get that right. So West Allen Park RFP, this is one that I will be honest has been slower to get going than I would have liked, but we are hoping to release that in the next week or two. And that is to build on the parks plan and basically go from a conceptual level plan that's in our master plan to a more construction level plan that we could implement when funding becomes available. And West Allen was identified as one of the higher need parks in the overall Parks and Open Space Master Plan. And then, as you probably are aware, there's been ongoing discussion related to the O'Brien Center and St. Stephen's both, but just, still very much in planning phase with those facilities and looking at the future there. And certainly we'll keep council, informed as that moves along. Increased recreational program levels, this is one that we've really been very proud about sustaining and keeping the wheels on. I think when ESSER came in, the answer was obviously going to be yes when we were offered this massive contract to do all this youth programming, but candidly, I think we're kind of scratching our head a little bit about like, how the heck are we going to do this? And I think really proud to say we have risen to the challenge. We've seen great success in terms of our participation, our enrollment, numbers of programs, and I think feel really confident about being able to sustain a lot of that moving past ESSER funding. So obviously a huge appreciation to council and the community for the support in this budget cycle as well. As I mentioned, S56, we've been tracking that bill pretty closely and working with our local reps to, keep an eye on what's going on and interject where we can. And I'm encouraged and hopeful about that bill moving through. And then ongoing work throughout this year that'll, I think, be leading to some decision points in fiscal year 24 related to Memorial Park, which for folks that don't know is the natural area down behind the carpet factory off of Elm Street and Forest Street. About 16-acre park there, lots of archaeological significance, really ecologically sensitive space. So trying to figure out, which is called out in the parks plan, how do we manage a really sensitive parcel like that moving forward with limited staff resources on the city side. So some interesting conversations going on there around with Winooski Valley Park District and what the future of that parcel could look like. But expect you'll see more on that moving into the next fiscal year.
Can you just fill me on what management is happening now?
Sure. I mean, I think like many of our parks, it's definitely reactive management. I will be honest. I think we have pretty limited staffing through Public Works that's available for park and facility kind of management. So beyond sort of the mowing of lawns and if a tree falls down, kind of clearing a path, we haven't been able to really bring a lot to bear to be more proactive. And I think that's where the parks plan felt really important to us to say, we need to know what we don't know and put it all on paper and start to work towards building a plan for how to implement. So this was a parcel, again, given its real sensitivity, that we felt like we may need to explore some different options for management beyond our staff because we don't have that expertise in-house.
Given it, management means a lot of different things, and
Yep.
usually there's some jargon related to your line of work. So
Yep.
what does that encompass? for
What are
you?
we thinking when we say management
Yeah.
of it? Yeah. So I think in terms of the functionality of that, I think largely unchanged in terms of maintained as a natural area, still accessible via trails and sort of pathways, but not looking to build significant infrastructure there. I think the one thing that's called out in the parks plan that would be an add is a canoe access point. That was identified as an area of like really flat grades getting in and relatively quiet water once you're to the river. So that's an area near the Blue Bridge that we talked about adding a canoe launch at some point. But beyond that, it's really just trail maintenance, making sure that, you know, bank stabilization is happening along the trail that runs along the river, some wayfinding and signage in there, and really looking at having someone that can help us manage that more appropriately, given the ecology, probably some invasives removal, just things that, again, we don't have the expertise in-house for right now. So trying to find some partners to help. I don't know if that answered.
That got more at a little bit more detail that I was
Yeah,
searching for as to
I think just
what does that include,
a better
why-
version of what's there now.
And like, if it is a natural area and there's not anything significant planned for it, what's the need for additional resources?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that level of detail helps get at it.
Great,
Yeah,
great.
thanks.
All right, and next slide, Paul. So looking ahead, I think some things, as a few of these I've mentioned, but that are on our radar moving into the next fiscal year, certainly the O'Brien Center and looking at the future management and potential improvements to that facility. So I expect that'll be a large item on the work plan in the next year. Certainly, as we await, you know, some decisions around the Winooski Senior Center and St. Stephen's property, anticipating there could be some work there as well. Again, post-ESSER, figuring out how do we sustain all this great growth that we've seen in a way that is accessible for the community and is continuing to serve a need. So that's, I think, something we're really going to be, you know, putting pen to paper on and really, again, trying to figure out which of the programs that we are committed to keeping free, where we do need to implement fees, how are we doing that, what does that look like? So I think really in a lot of ways a revisioning of the way we're delivering our rec services post-ESSER. Continued progress on the Parks and Open Space Plan, and again, including management of Memorial Park. And then last but not least, dependent on what comes through with S56, looking at implementing any changes and supporting any efforts there around childcare in the community, because that's been, again and again, that comes up as a really high priority. And I think that's it. So yeah, questions?
It's probably too early to tell, but I was just wondering, when you talk about like the library space and how that might be reimagined, do you have anything specific, or really just waiting to see how it all shakes out?
I guess what I would say, and you can throw things at me if I say too much. I mean, I think we've been really committed throughout the conversations we've had in the expansion of the library being a top priority. And as we look at any improvements or changes to the O'Brien Center, improvements to the library are sort of the non-negotiable top option as we look at that. So I think we are a ways out from knowing exactly what that looks like, but I think we really are feeling like that facility is maxed. You know, it's 1,800 square feet, it's a single room, and we're trying to do all the things in there. And so figuring out in this sort of question mark around the O'Brien Center, is there an opportunity that is, you know, affordable and sustainable that we can improve services, is kind of where we're at.
Right, and We've asked Champlain Housing Trust to come in at your next meeting, the May 15th one, to give you an update, because we're reaching the point where
Yep.
we need to be letting the community know where the staff is thinking is strategic. And, you know, before we go off and start raising money or finalize plans,
Right.
the council should have a view on that in the community as well. So that'll be step one of that.
Thank you, because I remember the concerns that repeatedly seem to come up with the library is not having quiet spaces, for one, because it's such a small space and there's so many different people doing so many different things in there. But also so that's helpful to know.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right.
If there are any questions from members of the public on Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature or the chat. Okay,
Excellent.
thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
Connor, you can just jump in whenever you have a question.
Thanks. I will never. I'm just kidding. One day.
John, welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening. Paul's running mine as well. So, thanks tonight. Sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, but get through it. So I'm here to give you an update on an overview on the Department of Public Works operations. Paul, you want to go to the next slide? So here's where we live in the organizational charts. You can go to the next slide. It's a little more detailed. So we're a pretty lean crew right now. We're basically in two different divisions. So we have what we call a streets crew, which handles streets, obviously, and then facilities, grounds. There's sort of whatever you can imagine comes up during the day. That's the crew that handles it. And then we have our water resources crew that they are salary paid for by the sewer and water rates. So typically we have two treatment plant operators that are down at the treatment plant, and then we have two field crew that handle the water distribution network and the sewer and stormwater network. And then for each of those different departments, we have two division managers, which they flow in and out of the field as well. So they're kind of working superintendents. I did also include on this slide, we have a lot of annual contractors that we utilize, given that some of the work is pretty specialized. So we have elevator contractors we deal with annually, HVAC, our treatment plant has, a pretty sophisticated control system. So that is a pretty significant chunk of our budget. So I just did want to call that out. We do have a lot of support from those contract users. And then, even when, if we're down staff, we will pull in additional support to do things that we typically do in-house, like mowing and snow plowing. So this winter, for example, we had a contractor that did all our facility snow plowing because we just didn't have the staff to cover doing roadways, sidewalks, and handle facilities. Any questions on kind of our staffing setup there? Okay.
So I did an insufficient review. PM stands for preventative maintenance.
Correct.
HVAC is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. And then the last line of alphabet soup there is wastewater treatment plant. I forget what SCADA stands for.
System control, blah, blah, blah. That's basically our control network that runs
Building
all of our
management
pumps
system.
and, yep.
Yeah, as well.
Yeah. So a lot of contractors that we deal with day in, day out.
Are we providing training support for the vacant CDL operator?
Training support is in,
So I believe it's pretty hard to find training centers and to get that training right now.
right.
So are we trying to attract somebody that says, you don't have it now, but
Yes.
we will cover your training?
Yep. So our current EO1 that was recently hired, during the interview process, we offered that, and we've done it with two other EO1s. EO1s do not have a CDL. EO2s have a CDL. That's really the only significance. So we will send them to Milton as the closest training
Yeah.
place, and the city will pay for that training, allow them to do it during work time,
Okay.
and then we will even train them on our own equipment. We've had 2 successfully go through that, and we're hoping our current EO1 who's interested will be
Great.
doing that next year.
Awesome.
Yeah. And the nice thing too is, I don't know why the union did this, but we're happy they did. In the current contract, it states that once we train them and pay for that training, they have to stay with us for a certain period of time. Otherwise, they have to pay us back for that CDL training. So we're pretty grateful for that. So it helps us retain those employees who train up.
Hopefully,
It's a pain for the remaining team too, right? Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
if they have to plug the holes, so it was a mutual benefit there.
Great. Paul, can you go to the next one? So this is kind of a really rough list of what we do day in, day out. I won't obviously read through all these. But, I mean, basically, our main goal is managing, planning, repairing, and maintaining city-owned infrastructure, all of the city-owned physical assets. That is our primary goal. And if we're doing a good job, you probably don't see us or hear us. You know, you're living your life and using the roads and sidewalks, and usually it's when we get calls about potholes and whatever issue. That's when that's when you realize we're there, or your water's not working, or something like that. So it's a very seasonal task. Obviously, like in the winter, we're mainly plowing, and then springtime it changes to prepping for the coming summer season. So it's sort of always in flux what we're doing, but it's on a very seasonal cycle. Any kind of questions on day in, day out operations? Okay, Paul, can you go to the next slide? So I wanted to show this because internally what we look at for when we come to you with like, hey, these are our priorities for the coming year, a lot of it goes back to our master plans. And obviously the city master plan sits above all of this, but then we have our own sort of categorical master plans for transportation, water, sewer. Some of those are regulatory, some of those are just, with our Chittenden County Regional Planning Partner, usually a grant-funded exercise like the Transportation Master Plan. And then it gets more detailed as sort of we progress down. So from the Transportation Master Plan, which is kind of high level, it gets into these kind of scoping studies. And then it goes even more detailed into like a project at some point. So an example would be the Main Street project, where a lot of the to-do and priorities that are in the Transportation Master Plan are addressing issues on the Main Street corridor. And some of that turned into what is now the Main Street project that started as a scoping study that's shown there, and then it eventually turned into an actual project. So that's why Elaine mentioned like the LaFountain Diane Street scoping study. A lot of those planning exercises are really important at the beginning because it sort of sets the tone as those projects sort of become a reality. So that's where we come up with a lot of our priorities. Is we'll go back to these plans, look at what work needs to still be done, what if there's infrastructure that's really deteriorating, we'll obviously put that up as a priority. Any questions on any of these kind of master plans? Oh, I do note that the good news is we're sort of running out of items in our transportation master plan after Main Street, so that will be due for a refresh. We like to do those every 5 years. There's no statutory requirement on transportation master plans, but we're getting through our to-do list. Same thing with the water distribution master plan. With the update with the upsize water main up Main Street, we want to just redo the hydraulic model on that, and do some flow tests and make sure that the current priority list is still accurate. So we'll probably do an update on that down the road after Main Street. And the treatment plant one was just done. It's draft right now. We just need DEC to sign off on it. Any questions on those? Paul, can you go next slide?
Do you have the parking study? Is that considered a study rather than a plan?
It's a study. I left that in Eric's court.
Okay. All right.
But it touches on transportation. So there are obviously a lot of other smaller studies and things that kind of
Okay.
touch on these ones. I did want to share, just because a lot of our work is very just physical infrastructure, just a really, really high level on the condition of the city-owned assets, just to give you a really high level overview. So we have we have 8 facilities, 9, I guess, if you count Abenaki, the proposed Abenaki garage. The colors represent a really high level what condition they're in: good, fair, poor, and that's really based on our capital asset needs. So, and I'm talking like really like high level capital assets. So roofs, HVAC equipment, those things that we have programmed into the capital budget that we know are beyond their useful life and need some investment. So as you can kind of see, the OCC is probably the worst condition. There's a lot of needs down there. A lot of the HVAC equipment is beyond its useful life. Emergency generators kind of beyond its useful life. We find new things that need fixed all the time down there, unfortunately. It's an old shopping center, so it's going to have issues. But for the most part, other facilities are in, excuse me, fair to good condition. I mean, with the exceptions, like City Hall, it's an old leaky building, but it's functional, and a lot of the major assets are, you know, they're still within their useful life.
Air leaks.
Yeah. What's that?
Air leaks, not water leaks, right?
Yeah, right.
For City Hall.
Yeah, I mean, it could use a refresh in here. You know, there's some paint and carpeting, but overall, it's functional, and we don't see a major investment needed in some of those major capital components. So, just a brief overview and kind of where we are. Any questions on facilities? Okay, Paul, next slide. Excuse me. And I'm just hitting kind of the bigger infrastructure categories. You know, we obviously own a lot of, you know, there's trees, there's lights, there's a lot of other stuff that's not included with this. Transportation, there's a lot of need, as you all know, going through the budget process. So we do have a pretty large backlog of street resurfacing that should be done to get up to sort of what a satisfactory condition of the roadway network that we own. So about 2 million that we estimate. That's probably conservative, but that would be getting our current road network up to what's shown there as a pavement condition index of 72, which is considered satisfactory. That was the goal set sort of by the Municipal Infrastructure Commission as a goal for the next few years. So as you've seen, we're incrementally trying to increase that paving budget and chasing grants for, you know, paving work to do that. Curbing and sidewalks, there's also a pretty large need there. The curbing is mostly that project that's over on the east side, Florida, Bernard, those streets on that end. There's not a lot of other bad curbing in the city. There's spot sections, but like that whole east side of I-89, a lot of that curbing is there is no reveal, or there's only like an inch or two, so that does need replacement. Curb ramps, we're going through, as you know, the ADA transition plan, so we've done a GIS inventory on where we need to do some work on upgrading those curb ramps to make them ADA compliant. Our goal would be to do that whenever we do a road resurfacing project. So as we do the annual road resurfacing project, incorporate those ADA curb ramp upgrades as well. And then you may or may not know, besides the Winooski River Bridge, which is we're doing some work on right now. You probably see we're doing V-Trans is doing some borings out there. We also own 2 other roadway bridges and a PED bridge that's connected to the Champlain Mill. The Weaver Street Railroad Bridge is also over 100 years old, and it's due to get another evaluation, structurally looking at if there's any improvements needed. So that will be something you probably see in the next budget round. I suspect that type of project would be grant friendly, and we'd have to do a lot of coordination with the railroad, but that is something that would be upcoming, not too distant future. Any questions on transportation items? Paul, can you go to the next one? And then last one is just our water resources assets. So I'm just showing you an example of our water distribution GIS mapping. We have this for all our assets. So what you see there is the yellow is from our master plan data of water mains that we'll have to replace in the future. Some are near term, some are longer term, but overall those are the sections of water mains that will have to get replaced in, say, the next 20 years or so, or should be replaced as recommended. And the red exclamations are water main breaks over the last, I think, 10 years. I think that's a 10-year cycle where we've had some breaks. On the excuse me, on the water resources side, as you know, the water main distribution network is really the main concern, because a lot of the network is over 100 years old. It's unlined cast iron, which means it's more fragile than typical ductile iron or plastic pipe that you see now. Excuse me. So that's something we're trying to plan for through our capital planning. It's roughly 14 million total that we'll be looking at to try to replace by 2036 is the recommendation, but we'll just have to keep looking at grant opportunities and trying to just get this into the capital plan. And then on the sanitary storm sewer side, sanitary system we've done a lot of video inspection of the sanitary sewer network. No major concerns that we found. We're currently doing storm sewer video inspections through CCRPC grant. So we've completed a phase 1. We're doing a phase 2 starting this summer with CCRPC. Phase 1 we didn't find any major issues with the network. There was a couple spot repairs that came out of that work, so that's been pretty good news. And then we are what's called an MS4 permit city, so we are regulated. Our stormwater that comes from our roads, buildings, city-owned buildings is regulated. So the latest permitting that came out requires that we prepare a phosphorus control plan to reduce the amount of phosphorus that's going into Lake Champlain. Based on that report, we have about 4 projects that would need to be completed by, we have a deadline of 2036. The estimate for that work is about $450,000. That work is, I would say, very grant friendly, so we would be pursuing grants to complete all of those. But that is ongoing work. The phosphorus control plan that we've drafted and submitted is still under review by DEC, so we are still waiting on some feedback from them for that. Any question on the water resources piece? Oh, and I did mention our treatment plant's in pretty good shape, I will say. Like, we've done a lot of capital improvements over the last few years. There's no major capital improvements that we see going forward. There's some small stuff like pump replacements and things like that, but overall the treatment plant's in pretty good shape. Operators do a fantastic job down there. We've always been well in compliance. We still have half our capacity flow-wise, so there's no major issues that we see down at the treatment plant.
Fun fact, the water that we put into the Winooski is cleaner than what's coming in.
Yeah.
I mean, that's upstream of it.
Okay, Paul, can you go to the next one? So getting into FY23 progress, we did touch on a lot of this at the last update on the 4-3 council. I will just share a few items since then. So one, Main Street project, we did get the green light to go out to bid. So we are projecting to go out to bid next month. So we're prepping for that currently. So that's really good news. So that process would be, we would expect bids back, I would say July, and then you would see them probably around that time.
You doing 60 days or 30?
Typically we do, it'll probably be 30 days, but by the time we level bids and get through everything, it probably won't get to you all until July, I would expect.
Can you entertain another question?
Absolutely.
For the bid review, since it's a joint, well, is there any need to jointly review that with the CC, RPC, or other partners?
Well, so it will be reviewed by our other finance partners. So USDA will be reviewing those bids. DEC, Agency of Natural Resources, will also be reviewing those bids because they will be financing a portion of it. So
that'll contribute to the July timeline.
yeah, usually that's what happens. Unfortunately, is like, we'll get bids back, but then you have to bug agencies to get
Used to be
responses.
Yeah.
It's such a simple statement John just made that we're now been given the green light to bid, go out to bid. I can't tell you how much, I literally can't because, I'm not doing it, but there was so much back and forth involved in the funders and the environmental review and between John and then of course right away negotiations before that. Angela and Ryan and John have been just, it takes a lot of time to have gotten to this point, so.
Yeah, it's a ton of little steps, and like especially kudos to Ryan, our city engineer. He's been phenomenal on this project, just incredibly organized and like bugging our partners. I mean, that's a lot of it. It's just like you just gotta like constantly, and bugger, unfortunately, some of our residents to get easements, but he's done amazing work on that. So yeah, we're excited, and hopefully we'll get really good numbers too. So we've started talking to some of the local contractors, and they're aware that it's going to be coming out to bid, and we do have some interest. So that's
Great.
That's
Awesome.
good news. Yep. And then Elaine mentioned the LaFountain Diane Street scoping study that's coming up next week, and the other update would be the bridge, the Winooski River bridge. If you traveled across it today, you probably saw they were doing some borings out there. Just get some geotechnical data for the upcoming design work. So Paul's been really instrumental on some of the public outreach discussions we've been having. So that's kind of where we're at right now, is just thinking through what the public outreach is going to be for the concept design for the bridge, and making sure we have the right stakeholders. And so you'll see a lot more on that, I would expect, in the coming weeks. So it still has to get designed. So we have to get a lot of stakeholder input on that.
Will council have a chance to see the communications plan?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, it's still in draft form, but once that's released, we can send that all out.
Thank you.
Great. Paul, can you go to the next one? FY24, we're keeping it really simple as far as what we want to do, because there's some pretty massive projects coming our way. So obviously Main Street, assuming we get good bid numbers, that's going to be in construction. So that's going to be a big lift. The bridge project that's starting to creep into concept design. VTrans CCRPC, Burlington, and us are working on that. I will say V-Trans is they're doing most of the work with their consultant, and we're providing feedback. Burlington and us are providing feedback on a lot of the work they're doing. So they're leading the charge on that, which is great. And then the Abenaki Garage, which we'll be talking about later in the meeting, if that gets into construction for the upcoming season. So yeah, it's a big investment, $37.6 million. That's assuming only the 5% cost share of the bridge that we pay. So it's like, upwards of really 70, I think 60 or 70 million in city investment. So a lot of funding coming into the city over the next few years. And besides the large projects, wrapping up those scoping studies that are currently underway that will creep into FY24. And then, as you saw in the previous mapping, really trying to figure out how we address maintaining our kind of old infrastructure, 100-year-old infrastructure, with a really small pot of community funds. It's, that is the challenge. So that's something obviously we'll be continuing to look at through our capital planning and grants, but that's going to be one of our big challenges. Is unfortunately a lot of this 100-year-old infrastructure is now coming up to its useful life, and how do we replace it before we start seeing some major breaks and things like that come up.
One thing on the bridge you'll hear repeatedly from me is that 5% contribution from Winooski is very different from 5% contribution from Burlington. So I urge us to continue to advocate for some additional subsidy for our population and our residents.
Yep. Great. Any other questions on that? I think that is it, Paul.
Any questions from members of the public? As a reminder, keep this information fresh in your heads for strategic prioritization. This is all the stuff staff are doing in addition to whatever we look at that list on a couple Saturdays from now. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item B, also for discussion, the strategic vision area goal updates.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it pretty simple. Do feel free to council to let staff know if you would prefer a different way that we present these. We've been keeping them pretty short. So the one thing I want to highlight under the housing update, which members of the public feel free to follow along the written report. Paul, if you could drop the link in the chat, I'd appreciate it. So the big news in the housing front is we did hire the Housing Initiative Director, Jasmine Hurley. She's off to a strong start as of a week ago today. The position will not be doing direct service or case management. Jasmine Hurley instead will be consulting with stakeholders to develop a work plan to strategically advance housing needs in the city. Are there any questions about the housing update generally? Anything that caught your eye?
I want to contribute to it through my Housing Roundtable group. Folks from Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity are coordinating with some other partners and school district staff on doing some tenant education trainings in the city, which is one of the items in our, recommended or new ideas. There we go, thank you. Yeah, new ideas. And some partners are interested in distributing landlord information as well, which I've talked to Elaine about through the rental registry data.
How will the language access plan efforts integrate into the housing work plan?
That is a very good question. So one of the elements in the language access plan approach includes what are kind of essential questions that need to be addressed. And so I'm sure that some of them will be related to housing. So we'll see as we go. But that's the general answer.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Or public comment? Okay.
All right, so for the economic vitality component, and so in the future, you can expect to get the housing updates from Jasmine. On economic vitality, I want to highlight again just one item from that report. The Working Community Challenge Grant item. It's been a while since I've said anything about it. So mostly reading from the report, which again, I believe Paul's dropped in the chat there. So the goal of Winooski's Working Communities Challenge Grant project, which is funded by the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, that our project here locally is to build cross-sectoral collaboration to enhance economic opportunity by advancing equity, especially for new American residents. The grantor also allows grantees a lot of flexibility to adjust to challenges. Our current challenge is the core team, which sets the grant work plans and is supposed to be comprised of cross-sector stakeholders, does not reflect the community the grant is intended to serve. So I've paused spending more of the grant until we have a more representative core team. Core team members with support from the Boston Fed have attempted to recruit a more reflective diversity of people to join it. We haven't been successful so far. So our next strategy to get at this challenge is to hire a short-term contractor to do that, with the possibility for a longer-term arrangement with that contractor. Or maybe they're not interested, but they could help us scope out find the next person. So we've been discussing the scope and the logistics of that contract. And there is a good chance that the result will be that the contractor would then be housed in another organization that has more direct relationships with the communities that this grant is intended to support. However much, the city wants to be that great, trusted partner, I don't know that we're there yet. So rather than hold up being able to spend this money strategically, this was an approach that we were thinking about taking. And we're still working on the details of that. Are there any questions about the economic vitality update more generally or on that specific item?
Yeah, on that specific item, a couple months ago, council was told there could be an opportunity to reallocate some of those funds towards the language access plan. Has there been any request or conversation on that?
Yeah, I asked for I asked the core team to weigh in on that as a use, and there wasn't consensus. And that at that time, the core team was like 3 people, and again, not representative. And so until we have like a proper core team, again, try not to spend the money, especially given that it's so flexible and it's supposed to be cross-sectoral. I'm not sure if I can, straight face make that case that a language access plan for the city could be good for for all, across sectors. I think I could, but, we'll see. So that's a maybe right now.
Okay.
Any other questions or public comment? Okay, thank you.
I will say that Vermont Community Foundation, who gave us a grant out of which we're paying the pilot stipends for the Inclusion and Belonging Commissioners, they've contacted all of their grantees to offer a follow-on grant. And I floated this idea with them, and they're amenable. So that would be $10,000, which is another possible source. We haven't applied yet because we're still working on
That's great.
on the scope.
Okay. Let's move on to item C, the Chapter 28 fees ordinance update. This is on for discussion.
Right. So this is pretty straightforward. I've outlined the proposed changes in the cover sheet and provided a copy of the track changes version of the city ordinance. A lot of the things that you see in here as changes are items that were discussed during the budget process. This includes adding fees for passport applications and photos, an addition of a processing fee for sidewalk permits, because currently the city retains no money for any of the sidewalk permits within the downtown. We are adding the clarification for a fee reduction for new dogs that are licensed after October 1st, an increase to the rental registry fee from $100 per unit to $115 per unit annually. We've added the language from the resolution approved by council at your May 2nd meeting, exempting the Abnaki tribes and bands from event and facility fees that are related to their tribal organization. And then there are some other minor clerical updates to alleviate some confusion that's been encountered with where fees were placed in the ordinance, or clarifying some shorthand that was used previously.
And you'll note that if you'll recall, there was a revenue item for plans review. We've had very slow conversation with the state about that, so we have not at this time added that. We'll see what happens. We're gonna do our best, but we might come back with that.
So I would suggest for council to first, if you have any questions or comments about the staff proposed changes, we can address those. And if there are other thoughts besides that, we can do that second.
I had some questions which I think you partially addressed, Angela, just introducing it, with the dates around the dog licenses. I don't know if it's still a little confusing. Would it be appropriate to put the year in there to clarify, like
Like the fiscal year?
yeah, the fiscal
So
year?
July 1
So
to
dog
June.
licenses are on a calendar year.
Okay. Well, the calendar year date in there. I was just wondering, because some people might be like, well, why would, yeah, I don't know. I was just wondering if some people might try and get around or misinterpret how it's laid out. Sorry for not having specifics. My thought was around having like 2023 in there.
This would apply to any year.
Can you make it so domestic quadruped, $10 per year per animal? Like, can we add language here that this is per calendar year? Thomas made a similar request about the chicken permit, that a lot of people don't realize that's an annual fee, not a one-time.
That clarifies my confusion,
So like
actually.
the slash is per, but that's not obvious to folks reading
Yeah.
this.
Okay.
And then I wonder then with October 1st saying it's prorated, because I assume that's the intent.
So that is the way that it's outlined in state statute. I'm
Okay.
not certain, it's not prorated based on the proportion of the year, otherwise it'd be a much lower fee.
Yeah.
So it's only reduced for new dogs. So if you had your dog and you just didn't license it until October 1st, you still have to pay the full late fee. It's only if you bought a new dog in like September and didn't license it until October that you get the reduced fee.
Okay.
Other questions on proposed changes?
I want to note that I just happened to have a conversation over the weekend over passport photos, and at a private entity, it was $18, so I think 10 is a deal.
Once we start offering it, we're not quite there yet.
Right, well, you know, put it on your to-do list. There was something later on I wanted to... see if I can find it. No.
I had one other, which was, what is a recreational vehicle?
RVs, specifically campers. We tend to have people who want to park them on the street and store them on the city right of way. Because they are a large obstruction, we require them to come in and get a permit so that we can approve their placement and know where they are. And it's just a nominal fee. It has been being charged. The fee is on the current application for parking a recreational vehicle on the street, but it had not been codified within the ordinance. So that one is an administrative cleanup.
Perfect, okay. That's what I assumed, but I wanted to understand.
Building on that question, does that apply to boats and tractor trailer trucks?
I would imagine that a tractor trailer, probably boat, it would depend on the size.
Because
But
I've
I-
seen the truck without the trailer, and parked in some spaces in the city, and other folks have had parked large boats at times, on city streets.
Yeah, we have had people come in and get the recreational vehicle permit for a boat trailer previously, and specifically it was like up on Pine Grove Terrace. So that has happened. I've not had a tractor trailer truck come in for that. I imagine because they don't think it meets the recreational vehicle definition. I think if we wanted to add something for that, it's probably gonna need a definition somewhere in the parking chapter.
Okay.
Any other comments for proposed changes?
For what the city
Yeah, what staff is
proposed?
proposing.
No.
All right, any comments on other parts of this ordinance?
I had a question, which is, if it can't be answered here and now, totally understand. But as I was looking for it, I was just wondering, are there waivers or scholarships for like some of the garden plots? The garden plot fee?
Scholarships are absolutely offered for all of the garden plots. Yep.
The
We've had quite
scholarship,
a few. We have an internal scholarship procedure. The only limitation placed on garden plot scholarships is it's only available for the first 2 plots, and we apply it to the 2 highest priced plots that somebody is purchasing.
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
the scholarship policy is really broad, like
That's what I thought.
any program I think can be counted.
Potentially, we only have procedures currently for the community services department, but it is intended that we could apply it to any sort of discretionary program that the city offers.
What's a peddler's fee?
In the past, we've had people who wanted to sell things from like a cart. Peddlers and itinerant vendors are people who are mobile and will set up a temporary space to sell from. I am going to admit that my ex-husband received a peddler's permit for a hot dog cart when I first started with the city. So it's that type of thing. You'll also see like ice cream trucks technically fall under the itinerant vendor permit.
Interesting. So, what about food, would food trucks, so obviously there's a cart component, but like a food truck component?
Depending on if they had a restaurant location in the city, but yes, they would technically fall under that, especially if they were coming in from another location.
Intriguing. That's some fun antiquated language.
Oh, peddler? Yeah.
So I wanted to throw out a suggestion on the building permit and commercial inspection fees. So the fee itself goes up with the cost of construction, right? So up to $15,000 cost of construction, $75 fee. 1501 to 30,000, $100 fee, etc. But when you do the math on that, the percentage of construction cost is going down. So like $75 is 0.5% of 15,000. The $100 fee is 1/3% of 30,000. Up to the $175,000, $250 permit fee is less than like 0.2%. I feel like there's an opportunity here. For one, I don't think it should vary like that, right? Like if the fee is 0.5% of the max construction cost, it should at least be steady as you go up the cost. But I think there's also an opportunity here to actually reverse that and do a small increase as you go up in cost. Like we've had discussions before about the impacts of development on the community and like an impact fee to gain more revenue to offset that growth, which was a pretty complex discussion we were having. It seems like there's an easier opportunity here with these permitting fees to sort of capture some of that, or at a minimum, like equalize the way that so you're not like getting a deal as you build larger. And I'm curious if this is something that has been considered under staff or where these numbers came to. Also, how council feel about that.
So, John, I'm gonna put you on the spot. I don't know if you had a chance to look at an email that Angela sent you this morning responding to this idea. So, she had pointed out that, and I didn't have time to look at my own copy, but so her recollections, you were anticipating changing the commercial inspection fees in a way where the fee was based on the level of risk rather than square footage. If that's true, then maybe we'd want to hold off so that there's not change fatigue. We can do it, consider them at the same time. John, is this ringing a bell? Are you there?
Yes, so thanks for bringing me in on the conversation. A couple things come to mind with this is on the commercial inspections, currently it's done on a square footage basis. And we've been challenged by some of the business owners of what that is. How did we come to those amounts? So we've done some extensive research of, before we were contemplating changing the fees, of what we could apply to that, that would give us a basis to answer the questions of a business. And through NFPA, they have an appendix in which you can apply risk factors. So it's the type of business, is there hazardous materials, the occupant load, that sort of thing that really matched up to the square footage. It would essentially, it matches up, but it would replace that square footage and give us a piece to be able to defend what we're having a good conversation with the businesses. Instead of just what appears to be an arbitrary square footage amount. So I'll stop there for just a second on that was my goal of kind of restructuring the commercial fees as they existed. Does that make sense to council?
It does. Yeah, for commercial inspections.
Yep. As far as the plans review, the manager is correct. If we're granted the permission to do plans review, there will need to be some side-by-side comparisons and some fee structures created for us to do the plans review. So everyone understands currently, if you're going to build something in Winooski that's more than a single-family home, it's a public building, or you're going to renovate such, you have to go get state permits, and there's a review done at the state, and they charge a fee per square foot or valuation per 1,000. So if we're granted that will replace or integrate in some ways with our current building permits. Those will kind of merge, planned review and building permits. So we will, in some instances, see increases, and in some instances, see some decreases. We are estimating, conservatively estimating, plans review, for budgeting purposes, we did $40,000 worth of revenue, I believe, Angela, if that's correct, is what we estimated. The last 5-year average from the state is 85,000. That people have already paid the state. They're already paying the state. So I think there is reason to pause and give us a chance to understand if we're going to be awarded the MOU. I don't think it's a matter if we're awarded it. It's just the question I have is how much work we're going to have to do with the state to be awarded it. I've made a case for Winooski that we know Winooski. I've been pretty straightforward with the state. I feel we can do a better job, better customer service. It further supports our community risk reduction efforts to bring plans review to Winooski and be doing it, keep that revenue in the city, allow us to work closer with our developers. So I would ask that you just pause. I think it's a good question, but let's pause. I suspect in the next week or two, it will be much clearer for us of what that MOU could possibly look like.
Thank you, that makes sense. I would not ask to advance any change discussion until you get that information.
I have a question about whether or not there's a separate, enforcement fee. Elaine?
Are you talking about like code enforcement
Yeah.
fees?
Yeah.
Yeah, so John can talk about like reinspection if that's related.
Yeah, so part of our ordinance update is, there are provisions in the ordinance that allows us to, so say we go do an inspection, we always work with people, it's kind of a freebie, if you will, for us to go back and make sure things are corrected. That's part of the fees they pay. I mean, at the end of the day, we just want it corrected for the residents. We want that life safety health piece. But we are experiencing, staff experienced it today, where there's a scheduled inspection, and we get there and the property owner hasn't done what he or she needs to do. So in this case, 2 staff members, it was on our schedule, they planned it, they got in the vehicle, they went there, knocked on a door, and the tenant was like, this inspection's not till tomorrow. And our staff had that conversation with the property owner because we had it on for tomorrow. And the property owner was very adamant that it was today. So in that instance, we should be able to bill for that. It's costing the city, 2 staff members, plus a vehicle. And we're missing, doing another inspection. And more so for the non-compliance. We got people who are making repeat trips back 3, 4, or 5 times.
There is a provision in the fees chapter that allows for a billing of reinspection. This has typically only been done in egregious cases where we're having to return multiple times. I can think of a few different properties where reinspection has been billed. 300 Main was one, but it's not often done.
Yeah, so the answer, I think, to my question is there's a separate section in the ordinance that covers enforcement fees. It wouldn't be in this.
Yeah, it's being handled in the update in the housing public billing registry chapter.
Okay, so not under chapter 28.
I guess that's correct.
And in terms of enforcement, if you're talking about somebody who leaves refuse on the side of the road, those are in fines. Those are not fees that we charge. Somebody could be fined for violating code.
That's a fine amount.
Yeah, that's not a fee.
Bree, you make me
Just
feel
to be
like I
really
didn't need to.
confusing.
Bree, you make me feel like I didn't need to say all that.
Well, it was very insightful, and I definitely I always appreciate the depth of content, so thank you. But I wanted to ask specifically if in this section, we would cover something like a fine for a dog bite. It's not a fee, it's a
Correct,
fine.
yeah, that's not,
Okay.
yes, that's right.
When will we get to look at the fine chapter?
It hasn't been up in some time.
In many cases, the fines are set by state statute.
That is,
So you have to be, you won't see those in the city ordinance fee chapter. A civil ticket, when we issue that amount is set by, first, second, third offense through state statute. That's not something the city can alter.
Okay. Very helpful.
Thanks, John.
I will share, Counselor Renner shared some comments in advance, which everyone is welcome to do, should they have to miss a meeting. Suggesting considering a small late fee at the library and increases to non-residential pool rates.
For voting on it.
Oh, we
We're
don't,
there yet.
we don't need to vote on that. I'm just saying, if you want to discuss it further, we could. But if no one else is interested in those, I'm just bringing forth his suggestions.
I am very much opposed to thinking about library fees because those always impact our lowest income folks who need the library the most.
and we do charge people who do lose library books, they have to pay a restock fee to replace the book in circulation if it just is completely missing.
Did Counselor Renner specify which non-resident pool fees? Because there's,
All of them. He suggested raising all of the non-residential.
did he specify by how much?
Mm-hmm. One moment. Family season 180, adult season 85, youth season 60, adult and youth day 10.
I'd be willing to consider some non-resident increases. For family, I don't agree with increasing it that much.
I was gonna say, those amounts seem a little significant given the larger economic scope that a lot of families are facing. I think that folks coming from out of town to use our resources, I think it's fair to ask a little bit more from them, because they may not be contributing to the city in other ways, but I think that those are a little steep. I was thinking more like 10% or 15% more than what residents pay versus like 30 or 40.
So just to that point, so we do have a markup on non-resident rates already.
Yeah,
It's about
so-
25% above the current, I think 20 or 25%, I don't have it right in front of me, but it's consistent across. I think one thing in considering that now that would be tricky is that we've already begun pass sales for this year, so anything that we consider, I would recommend we look at that for next season at this point, because it would be really tricky to go back when we've already sold over 200 passes for this year. It is something we talked about before this budget cycle, and I think given that we're just 2 years in really with this pool, I think we wanted to give it one more year, see what the patterns looked like. 2 points, it's easy to make a line between 2 points. I think once you've got 3 data points, you can really start to see what the pattern looks like. So I think we wanted to give it one more season at the current rates and then assess after the season and see where things are at.
And one thing I'd just like to share is the pool is one place where non-residents cannot receive scholarships for passes. We do allow non-residents to apply for scholarships for any other programming, but pool passes is the one place where it is not allowed. It is only Winooski residents who can receive scholarship for a pool pass.
I support your inclination to hold off discussion.
You sold me on the 3 data points.
Okay.
All right.
Are there comments on any other items in this fees chapter? Okay. Seems like we're I'm not hearing a lot of concerns, so this could come back for approval for the staff proposed changes.
Yeah, I'm supportive, so.
All right, thank you.
So I believe somebody needs to introduce this and you need to set a public hearing date.
Oh dear, I did not warn it that way. Well, we will,
Next month.
I'd still ask you to do it though, so that we can have the fees in time for July 1.
So I move to bring forward the proposed fee changes for public hearing. The next council will, as administrative procedures allow, at the next soonest opportunity.
Second.
Is that a sufficient motion, Elaine?
I guess you could technically do it on Saturday.
I really don't want to add anything to that agenda.
Yeah,
I mean, you could
I
just,
don't think we need to.
you could set the hearing on Saturday.
Well, because the warning, let's just make sure
Yeah.
we've got our ducks in a row with
Right.
public noticing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we'll warn that agenda item for the retreat, but all it is you're gonna set the hearing date.
Okay. Do you want to vote now
Yes.
to the introduction? Okay.
Yes.
There was a motion by Bryn. Did you second it, Charlie?
I did.
Yes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Let's move on to item D, the Q3 Treasurer's Financial Report.
Unfortunately, John Fenney was unable to join us tonight. He had to travel unexpectedly. He has provided you a memo where he's analyzed the Q3 projections that were provided to him, and happy to answer any questions that you might have from that information.
Thank you, Angela. I will say, going back at the Q2 and Q1s, things are tracking. I didn't see anything particularly surprising in this report. Do folks have questions?
I don't have any. Appreciate the detail.
Any public comment or questions? Okay. That is on for discussion. Let's move on to item E, the Downtown Winooski Memorandum of Understanding. So, this Memorandum of Understanding, these are, as you know from other examples, these tend to be operational. We don't necessarily look at them on an annual basis unless there's a potential financial change or policy shift, similar to how we address like the MOU for how we work with the school. So this document guides kind of our expectations from downtown Winooski and their expectations from us. As an example, last year there was some negotiation to take some items that our previous Community and Economic Development Officer position, no longer have that, was vacant, and move some of those responsibilities to downtown Winooski, and so and to codify the Juneteenth and Pride events. And so staff worked with the executive director there to make changes. There has also been, over the course of the last year, expressed interest in a financial change to the agreement, which is why I asked to bring the MOU back to council. We also received a copy, so we can discuss this proposed financial change, but if there are other points of interest in the MOU that anyone wants to discuss, we can do that as well. And so what had been suggested previously was to add a cap. So maybe 2 budgets ago, we decided to allocate 5% of the local options tax that we collect to downtown Winooski to support their operations. There's been conversation since then about potentially putting a cap on that. The rationale being that dollar amount could increase significantly without any additional services or expectations from the organization. And so a cap that would have to come back to negotiation would be a prompt to make sure that we have that discussion. I also would point out that local options tax So one of the reasons that we wanted to use some of that money to fund the organization is because it's supporting businesses who create that tax. The local options tax is also collected from online sales and the bills that we pay as residents. So it doesn't all directly come from on-the-ground businesses here. I also want to add to the historical context here that pre-pandemic, the organization was planning to incorporate some kind of membership fee structure for businesses as another revenue source, as other organizations of this nature do. And that I haven't heard happen. I haven't heard that been discussed since then. And so I think this conversation also could prompt, what is the thinking on that front? So with that context, I know we have some folks from the organization here, but I would just pause for comments and questions from City Council.
So I guess I want to start with some context and framing background on this. It's called an MOU, but it feels like a contract, and it feels like it should be discussed, something where it places the city at a disadvantage to discuss contract negotiations in public session. So it'd be great to understand why this is not treated that way.
I don't know how the state statute directs it, because we have never taken an MOU into executive session to my knowledge.
It didn't occur to me directly.
Well, how about we start with, why is it treated as an MOU and not as a contract?
Well, so I think of MOUs as a discussion between more or less equal partners. So they're an independent organization, even though we have to have one in order to have a downtown designation. So it's sort of in between to me. A contract is where we could pick and choose among presumably several service providers. Obviously in Vermont, actually, that's not always true, but that's the expectation. Whereas that's not the case here. We can't pick and choose for these particular services. So they have the ability to negotiate with us because we don't have anyone else. I don't know if that's necessarily a technical answer. Angela, do you have any thoughts you'd add to that?
I think because it's not just us paying them for services, there is a little bit of mutual exchange. They have expectations of the city in addition to us having expectations of them. It's not just us paying them to do a specific set of things. It's a little amorphous. And that's why it's a memorandum of understanding rather than a specific contract to provide service. And I believe Meredith is here and has her hand up and may have additional insight.
Oh, you've already pulled her over. Excellent.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give a little bit of context to that. So I do believe you could change it to a contract, but that would set into motion other changes. So I wasn't present when the MOU was drafted, but I was present when it was enacted for the very first time. And the staff time and time of other experts in the state that was put behind this was significant. So I do know that it was incredibly thoughtfully designed and executed, and we have continued to utilize it as an MOU because there haven't been significant changes into how we operate and with the city. I think barring the pandemic, maybe things would have changed at some point, but we're trying to give everyone a little bit of grace and try to actually maximize this relationship. I think there's incredible benefits to not having it be a contract. I think the city would see a decrease in services if it became a contract. I'm just going to be honest with you, as I'm not currently employed by the organization. I'm a volunteer, speaking as a former executive director. I just know that the thoughtfulness and the legalese and the financial decisions behind an MOU versus contract were very, very intentional. And so I think it's worth if that's something that the council and the city staff really strongly believe in exploring, I think it could be explored. But my understanding of the differences is that this is a much better situation for the city and for the organization. And it's my understanding that this hasn't been enacted this wasn't enacted until 2019. So previously, funding and other relationships were there without anything in writing. And there have been many discussions over the years about, and I believe at one point the city did hold the downtown designation and the downtown organization. And it was a lot of staff, a lot of expertise on the state level coming in and deciding that it was the best decision to separate that organization from the city. There are, across the country, downtown orgs that sit within their municipality, and in that case, the municipality has full oversight and control over everything that the organization does. And in some cases, there are contracts in place for specific things, like you will run this street fair, or you will run these specific things. We have looked at not only state examples, but national examples of how other downtown organizations operate within a municipality. So it's my understanding, based on that research and based on the 4 years that this has been in place, that the Memorandum of Understanding is the best situation for both parties. But they're certainly up for discussion. I mean, this is not something that is in place forever. And we were actually, we've been given the option over the years to not bring this to council and have it be public discussion. I mean, not that you could still discuss at any time, obviously, and have it be kind of an administrative process. But I think it's incredibly important to have it be brought to council as discussion and talked about. So that's kind of where a little bit more of that context of the MOU is in place. But I think that the funding that's there is also, it's very difficult to explain. It's almost like a moving target. I think Angela used the word amorphous, and that is such a lovely phrase, because I get really fearful of looking at, and even when Mayor Lott said some of the tasks of the Economic Development Officer were put into the MOU, that raised a red flag for me, because they were already there. We just rearranged the wording a little bit. So we were already doing that work in conjunction, but now we're the only people doing that work. So again, there wasn't that expectation of, you're a commission of the city, you're part of the municipality, and therefore we're under contract, so you're providing X, Y, and Z. This is a give and take. This is we love being super, super aligned on the economic vitality master plan, and super aligned with what city council is looking at, and also what city staff members are looking at. So again, I would personally highly recommend keeping it as an MOU versus moving it to contract, but it certainly is an option. And there's also a great thing about the MOU is that if there's a reason, and I don't know what the reason is that Councilor Oakley was bringing that up, but if there's a reason, like, well, I want it to be a contract so that we can have more financial statements, or we can have more frequent reports, or we can have, I don't know what it would be, that could also be put into an MOU. So if there are needs that the council has, those things could be put into the MOU, they just aren't there right now. I could say more, but I'm gonna stop there.
That's really helpful, Meredith, thank you.
Anybody else wanna?
Yeah, I think for me, I'd like to see just a little bit more transparency, and like you were saying, Meredith, about just access to where exactly that 5% is going every year. We see it in the form of the events that downtown hosts, but just as a resident and a taxpayer and a counselor, I think that that would be helpful. I think, typically more transparency is better in some cases, especially around money and spending. So that's my 2 cents on it.
There is a
Yeah.
reporting
sorry, go
built
ahead,
into the
Lynn.
memorandum, into the MOU. So that is something that you can already get under the current language.
And I'll be honest with the local option tax, yes, to Christine's, to Mayor Lott's point, that it is like you buy something on Amazon, I think. It counts as local option tax, I think. Or if I don't know what the exact rules are. But ultimately, at this point, it's 5%. And so when we originally came to council, whatever number of years ago, so just to give you some context too about, we have received, I believe, Angela can correct me if I'm wrong, I think we've received 2 or maybe 3 local option tax payments so far. So
2.
Is that right, Angela?
It's just 2, yeah. This is
Just
the
2.
first fiscal year where it's been in place.
Yeah, so
There
we've
is
received 2 of them. So we've received half a year's worth of 5% local option tax so far. So we're not very far into this, to be honest. But we've already seen an incredible help with the sustainability, with having matching opportunities and things like that. So we would like to keep it at 5%, but we understand that there is, if 5% of what it is now is a lot different than 5% of what it could be later. So I fully understand that discussion is very important, but just knowing that we haven't even had a full year under our belt of seeing how this funding kind of hits our org. And so, sustainability and looking ahead to, what we want to do in terms of not just events and not just engaging with the community, but advocacy and getting deeper into expanding staff and things like that. We can't do any of that if our hands are tied behind our back. So I do think that this was, again, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but in my understanding,
Muted.
You're muted.
have I been talking this whole time on mute?
You just
No.
said, in my understanding, and that's when it cut out.
Oh no, what was I understanding? So many things.
You said that you can't do the same amount of work with your hands tied behind your back.
Perfect, thank you. So I was gonna say, it's my understanding, and I don't wanna put words in the previous community and economic development officer's mouth, but it's my recollection that we actually were gonna ask for much more, a much higher percentage, and maybe 10% or something like that, and then we knocked it down to 7.5%, and then council ultimately decided to go with 5% for the first year. So we can look back at minutes and see what that exact discussion was, but that's kind of what the discussion was that it was at hand. It wasn't whether this should happen. It was like, wow, this is one of those revenue sources that makes sense in terms of it's a local option tax. It's an additional 1% tax on service and fees. It's not a tax that it's not a property tax. It's not coming from those other pools. This is a local option tax. And it's a great boon for the city. And so 5% of that made a lot of sense in terms of an area to pull from year over year, a line item, let's say, for the organization where it would make sense for the work and for that MOU to exist. But I totally understand. So we would probably be asking for that percentage to go up, I'll be honest with you. So if there is a cap discussion, I think there should also be a percentage discussion. So because the original ask was, I believe, 7.5%, it might have been 7 or 8, I can't remember exactly, I'll have to look. Feels like a million years ago. And it was brought to 5, which was something that the council at that time was more comfortable with. At this point, I think, the conversation, what my expectation of the conversation would be that it would be around, should we cap the dollar amount? Should we cap the percentage? Because again, I have a feeling that this is going to continue to come up. So if anything that that this council wants to do in conjunction with city staff, and certainly will participate, my recommendation would be to discuss it around both percentage cap and dollar cap, because I would imagine that we could also come to council and ask for a higher percentage too. And so maybe that's where, it's a, I don't know how the math would math, but I think it would be interesting to have that discussion about, is it only ever going to be 5%, but then there's a cost cap in there? Or is it a cost cap within 5%, but then we could come back and ask for, with various, data to back it up, 6 or 7%, and then that would be a reopen of that discussion about a cost cap at those percentages.
Meredith, that tracks with my memory. About
Okay,
the
good.
initial
I appreciate that,
conversations.
because feels like it was 10 years ago.
I think, I did not realize you only had 6 months of fees so far.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, I mean, these things move slowly, you guys know
Yeah.
that.
it might be interesting to, as Charlie suggested, add into the MOU reporting a financial component. And then when Melissa comes back for the 6-month report out, and there is more data on the financial side and how much local options tax you're receiving in expenses, to revisit this discussion then.
Yep.
So I have some frustration with this agenda item because we have a single paragraph to it. We didn't have the MOU included as a link. Counselors didn't have necessarily that much ability to review the MOU prior to this meeting. We don't have a context for impact of services other than our own experience. There's no report included in this. We don't have any financial points of reference year over year. We only have this one MOU with this one paragraph. So it feels like a disadvantage to have this discussion without really any compiled data or documentation to refer back to.
That's fair. I mean, we had the report of impact in our last meeting agenda. It was a miss that the MOU wasn't attached initially and then was shared later on with us. And as we just discussed, we don't have that financial data. And so we could at a future time.
But I feel like Angela writes the checks. She would have had the ability to report or share on a cover letter or something what the local options payments to date are,
They're about $12,500.
as well as how much we've contributed in the past. That's all information that we already have somewhere. So it just
My
feels,
understanding on this item was that it was to get the idea out there, and then,
Yeah.
so as we were heading into the discussion, then we could share more information for the decision. There's the operational piece that I was trying to keep out of the council level. But anyway, that's some of the background as to how this agenda item came to be the way it was.
yeah, and I guess usually it just goes discussion, meeting, approval, meeting, and usually not discussion, approval. So kind of preemptively being prepared for, here's our chance to discuss, the next meeting we approve. We don't have, I feel like I don't have enough information to even make an informed decision on. Like, I don't have a particular position because I don't have enough information.
So correct me if I'm wrong, you guys don't have a copy of the MOU that's been executed?
We have a copy, it was mailed or emailed earlier today.
Okay. So that has been in place, or that's the MOU that's been in place and signed last year, I believe.
Right.
It was not conveniently included in the agenda links.
Okay, so it wasn't linked, okay.
Yeah.
Just clarifying that point.
Because it's local option tax, this isn't something that, or I guess I'm trying to remember certain pages within our budget of, community partners. Was this thought of within our FY24 budget, or because it's local option tax?
We budgeted for 5% of 500,000 to go to downtown Winooski in the FY24 budget.
Okay, and can you tell me, sorry, the exact number, like the estimated number that would be, amount of money?
So if we take the current year actuals with last year's estimated, we're maybe going to be on track for 500 this year. So it's that's a safe guess for next year.
It's approximately $25,000 that's in the general fund budget to go to downtown Winooski from local options tax. In addition, we pay $12,500 from our parking meter fund, and we pay all of the sidewalk fees that are paid by downtown businesses, which are anywhere between $6,000 and $8,000, depending on which businesses obtain sidewalk permits.
That's helpful.
And again, to give context to those line items, those budget line items were put in many, many years ago to say this is directly related to the work of the downtown. There needs to be some sort of municipal downtown connection. So those two budget items have been in place for many years. Angela can tell you the exact number of years, long before my time. And the local option tax discussion pretty much started right away when I started, just thinking there's not sustainability for this org. We've had general fund balance requests. There was a fund balance request to hire an executive director. That was not sustainable. That didn't seem like a good use of everyone's time. So this was the alternative. Again, this is not forever, but it is a conversation about the sustainability of a downtown org that was, going to fold and going to cause a lot more headaches. And so, we're just at the point where, I appreciate the visibility of the events and things like that. But those events are typically paid for by sponsor dollars. We don't touch the city dollars for those, and we pretty much break even. City dollars go towards lots of other things that we're unable to use other grant funding or other much more restricted funding for. Operations, administration, communication. Think about over the pandemic, there was 2, 3, 4, 5 emails a week that going out, hitting boots on the ground, that kind of stuff. So that's the invisible work, and then that's the unrestricted funding that goes to that. But again, those streams of funding, sidewalks, parking, and local option tax, all were discussed very intentionally by many people, past and present, to make sense for the sustainability of the organization, the sustainability of the relationship, and to not have it be brought up, a lot where it's like, oh gosh, this can't happen this year. If the local option tax doesn't come through, if something changes and that stream, cuts off, we don't get any money. So we are, our funding is based on the success of that. Our funding is based on the success of parking, where our funding is based on the success of sidewalk use. So all of those things make sense in terms of the direct relationship to our work for economic vitality, but they also have limits already. So just kind of wanted to put that idea out there that they're not, this is part of a, general fund request that's going to be in the budget forever. And, these are all things that are tied to other activity.
Thanks, Meredith. So it's roughly 40 to 45,000 coming from city, I'll use quote, sources.
Yeah, my feeling is I can't, more transparency is always good, and maybe if there is this increased / sustained finance going in, just having that would be helpful. Again, thinking just, Bryn said, to kind of have all those pieces, even thinking about when the next budget season comes around, stuff like that, just having that awareness. But I also am thinking, especially while we don't have anyone in this, the CETO position, and Meredith, as you said, weren't taking anything over, but in in some cases you are downtown Winooski is the only one doing some of this economic vitality stuff. I really feel like there is that need, and in the grand scheme of things, it isn't a whole lot of money to go towards what I see as the benefit for the city and our residents. So I think I'm holding those two things of I see a lot of benefit, but I also of where the money is going. However, I'd love the the transparency to connect those dots and confirm.
So could we give staff direction to negotiate some financial data into the regular reporting? Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yeah, I think that's what I would put forward. Talking about the exact percentage, I'm not sure. I'm open if others would want to do that. But.
Meredith, your hand is raised again.
Thank you. Sorry. Just to Aurora's point, I wanted to also just mention again this like amorphous word because it does get, and the reason why I may not be as clear when I say like we are doing the work of part of the work of that was in the CEDO is part of that is because I don't want to tread on a contract term. I don't want to tread on we do this and we get paid this because that is a contract. So I hesitate to be very strong in my wording about those things, but yes, we were doing that work and now we're the only people doing that work. And not only that, we've ramped that up significantly in the past year. Even just requests from city staff, from various departments. Like, we don't have anyone that can help you, here's Meredith. So I think I hesitate in a public place like this, especially talking about an MOU that's not a contract, to say, yes, we're doing that work. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that yes, when I say we aren't doing that work, it's only because I don't want to say that we're under contract to complete those tasks. It's in the MOU and we do fulfill those, but it's just tricky, the wording.
Elaine, I sent a question that I don't know if city staff had a chance to look at around, again, if we just have some estimates around local options tax going forward, or again, if it's just to, I guess.
So we were attempting to answer that before, I thought, Angela and me just now,
Okay,
about,
The 500,000?
yeah.
yeah, okay,
That's still a safe estimate for FY24.
okay. Thank you.
We don't have any estimates further out than that. It's too risky to.
No, because we've
forecast.
only got 2 quarters of this year, so. So if you add the current 2 quarter actuals plus the equivalent 2 quarters from last year, then it's like 481,000. So maybe we'll hit 5 if this is presumably a slightly better year than last year with more opening. So again, if it's 500, then the estimate that we use in the budget is a safe number to estimate for FY24.
Okay. So I think what I'm trying to get at is the recent history of local option tax is not reliable enough to forecast forward. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, so there were some COVID years in there that make it hard to estimate, and there's been changes downtown.
Yeah.
So we haven't done the full, we haven't like looked at the whole history and then looked at all of the conditions of those years, no.
Okay.
So let's see if we can look at that data, if we have a future discussion around the funding structure.
So the $500,000 number that is in our budget is my best estimate based on the historical performance of the local options tax. I'm not quite sure, I can give you all of the data of what we've collected so far, but I'm not gonna be able to come up with a better estimate than that at this point.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying, Angela.
Are there any other questions or comments?
So is there more financial data you would want for a potential cap discussion?
It would be nice to have it all in one place.
Have what?
Have essentially the summary of allocated funds for downtown Winooski in a cover letter, written down, compiled into one place.
Sure.
What was agreed when, was it 2021. And, since then, 2 payments of local options tax, what amounts? Having it in one place for a point of reference, not just for council, but for residents would be nice.
Gotcha. Okay, so the information you heard today,
Yes,
but actually written down.
yes.
And I think what we're asking for, potentially added into the MOU, is that the reporting that we receive from downtown Winooski includes like their expenditures. So we see where the money is going.
Itemization would be helpful for sure. Like, not specifics, like we bought 20 balloons or whatever, but like, yeah, I think that would be really helpful knowing what dollars were set aside for what and where they ended up going.
It's probably mostly salary. But
But
what
it-
other items, yeah.
But just
Or-
having that out there, I think, is sort of that's,
Yeah.
that's my end goal with this, is just to be able to look at it, and so everybody else can too.
And like, if it's appropriate, sponsorship dollars, so we can see how much they're leveraging other funds.
Yeah, I think
That'd be great.
we're approaching this as a partnership. We just want more clarity and transparency of what the funds are being utilized for now for the entire organization. There's a greater ask, so how does that compare to the current expenditures? I mean, it just feels like a reasonable ask.
Yeah, just to set some expectations, I'll be curious to see what the new executive director is comfortable with. There is a level of reporting that becomes quite onerous for a small nonprofit, but also it's not unheard of to provide financial statements to funders. So
I don't
See
see
what
why it
adds
would be
up.
anything more than what the board would be getting anyway.
Oh, Melissa's here.
I am here. I've been listening. Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this conversation. Yeah, finances are my first and go-to. I was raised by a CPA. So I will be as transparent as you want all of the time. Not that money drives everything, but I think that it really drives smart decisions on how we're gonna figure out what our programming is and understanding who our sponsors are and what we're going to leverage for community partnership. There's so much tied to the green paper. It's not just a profit and loss statement, which I'm always happy to provide at any given point in time, but there's just a lot of nuances that go into the financing side of things. And you've got federal grant money, you've got state grant money, you've got municipality money, and you've got obviously this local option tax. There's so much, and sponsorship. There's so much that goes into it. And yeah, finance is in my blood. So you want to know about money, you're going to know about money. I guess that's my 2 cents. And I really appreciate everything Meredith said. I'm learning so much tonight from all of you. Thank you so much for giving so much space and time to your agenda for this discussion. It's really like helping with my onboarding so much. And I'll stop talking now.
Thank you, Melissa. Any other questions or comment? Okay. Let us move to item F, the Arbor Day Proclamation. So we annually proclaim May 5th as Arbor Day in the city of Winooski. Our tree committee member, James Duncan, submitted this proclamation and is working to organize an event, but no details are available yet. This is the standard Arbor Day proclamation that we receive from the Arbor Day Foundation, and also I think supports our Tree City USA designation. Any questions or comments? Any public comment? Okay, do I have a motion to approve me signing the Arbor Day proclamation?
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion by Aurora, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. I'm going to call a 5-minute recess before we start the next item. I've got 8:14. We'll reconvene at 8:19. Yeah. I will reconvene us. We are on item G, Winooski Falls East Development Lot 7D status update. John, are you introducing? Yes, please.
John, can you come up here?
Excuse me. So, good evening. I'm just going to intro this, and then we'll bring in Bill Nicat if he's on there.
Yep.
Oh, and Doug. Great. So we just wanted to give you sort of a status update on the project. So we wanted Bill and Doug to come in and just run through what's been going on since our last meeting on the development project.
What's that? Oh, yeah. Bill. Oh, there you are. Welcome, Bill. Welcome, Doug.
Good evening.
Oh, could we get a little more volume in? Bill, can you say something?
Sure.
Yeah, we're gonna get the volume turned up real quick.
Careful what you wish for.
Oh. Could you speak again, please, Bill?
Sure, I'm here. Hope everybody's doing well.
That's better.
It's better.
Okay, that's good. Okay, welcome. We are
Thank
here for your update.
So John, are you providing an update or an introduction? Maybe I missed that part.
Yep. So I just introduced you and Doug. So if you want to
Okay.
just run through kind of an update since the last time we met. I believe that was December 5th when we chatted with council. Just how we're status-wise where we're at with the project.
So I'll let Bill speak about the garage, but I'll give you a quick summary and update on the hotel. As many of you know, Marriott did approve and grant us a franchise for a Marriott hotel. That happened a few months ago. Since then, we've been working through the Marriott process, and recently they have approved our branding proposal material for the project. And as of, I think, last week, Marriott just recently approved our Phase 1 architectural review. So we're making good progress on the hotel and working with the Marriott team. And I'll let Bill speak to you about our update on the garage.
Thanks, Doug. I think that, John, by all means, if you hear anything that sounds askew to you, let me know. But we were in front of you for some time, as most of you remember who were there, in December, talking about the need for some additional funding for the project under certain circumstances. We, unfortunately, since that time, we're not able to immediately take the plans that had been developed and find a path forward to construct them, for that revised budget. And so, I think the overall summary here is that Nettie's continuing to work with DEW and with the city to sort out, hopefully, soon, a path forward to build the garage, for this revised budget, which has been kind of our goal. The challenges, I would say, are twofold. One is that the design incorporated a lot of concrete and site work at a time when there's a shortage of those particular items, and we're certainly expecting to have some challenges finding warm bodies to do the work that we needed, but it's been more challenging than we had expected in the sense that costs are going up faster than the grants that we're obtaining to help defray construction costs. When we first suggested this update to you, to staff a few weeks ago, we were hopeful we'd be in front of you tonight with more of an actionable plan moving forward. At this point, there are bids due tomorrow to do on site and concrete for the sort of latest concept of how this garage could get built, and you know, we are hopeful that by next week, we'll be reviewing with John and staff, you know, those revised ideas so that we can bring them to you at the next meeting, you know, with dues participation, so that we can talk about more meaningfully about schedule and, you know, what gap is remaining if there is any. Obviously, we wouldn't still be working on the housing and hotel components if we didn't think we could get there, but I am disappointed to not have a more concrete plan for you tonight versus 2 weeks from now.
So you, Bill, you're expecting bids tomorrow
We are.
for the current design?
We are expecting some revised site bids tomorrow, and that will help us to understand, you know, whether what we've done is looked at some alternative ways of retaining the earth in the project. As you know, the thing's built into a hill. There are several different ways we can go about providing, basically retaining the earth so you have a site to work within. And we've looked at an alternative permanent supportive excavation program, which we worked through with John and staff, and sort of 3 weeks ago put out to bid, 3.5 weeks ago. And we had originally hoped to have those bids in hand last week, but in order to get additional interest, the contractor agreed to extend the date from last week into this week. So hopefully we'll have a couple of new site and pile numbers tomorrow, and that'll tell us whether this direction that we're looking at is an improvement.
So, to be clear, the challenge you're having, it's the cost or just the access to a construction company?
The challenge that we're having is with cost. You know, the reality is that in the last round of pricing that we did, we had only one competitive response in a couple of trades, and in those particular areas, the contractors were not ultra comfortable with the scope of work that they were being given, and so we were concerned that anytime you only have one bidder, and obviously you're above the budget, you want to look at ways to try to encourage additional participation. So originally, this garage was designed as a steel frame with poured concrete decks. In the midst of the pandemic, when steel prices were sort of soaring out of control, there were some changes made to the design to encourage additional concrete use. Thinking that would be a benefit. It was a benefit our engineer had found to be helpful in some other projects. And now, effectively, we're sort of looking at the possibility of returning to a steel structure because steel prices have moderated on the one hand, and on the other hand, the availability of concrete labor in particular has been a real challenge to source. Just a lot of projects looking for a home right now. And we find that the concrete in particular can be quite aggressive in their pricing.
Okay, thanks for adding that.
Sorry to be confusing.
And does this timing, it's like if you're seeing bids with them next week, and it's coming to the next council?
Our instruction to do has been to provide their planning, or they'll be ready to come back to you with this next meeting with a more concrete report of what the impact of this rebid has been on our pricing and on direction on the timing and schedule of what they can do to move forward. So John and I had identified kind of a list of items we would want to bring to you. I should say John's identified and handed to us a list of things that they'd want to see to bring to you as a full report, and we weren't able to get that to you for this meeting, but we do think we'll be able to do that in the next council meeting.
Okay.
So the challenge is now, and I can't tell you how big of a challenge, unfortunately, but the challenge now is that we've already gotten an extension on the commitment letter from the winning well, from the bidder that was selected for financing. So they didn't raise any stink about extending it. That deadline is May 12th, which is before your next meeting. Now, they might be willing to extend it again. However, some of the, these are very specific banks that are failing, but you never know what's going to happen apparently, because nobody predicted those three were going to go. So there's always a risk that there's just something that might shake them up. Until we sign, they're not obligated. So if something changes in the market, it is, and again, I have no idea how likely this is, but there is always a risk that we just lose out on this particular proposal for financing. I mean, technically, they could withdraw tomorrow or tonight. Until we sign, they're not committed. So
Okay.
that's an uncertainty that we've got right now.
So the related update I'd provide to that is we are fortunate to be in a financial climate, notwithstanding the failure of a couple of Western banks, that, the general climate overall that we're seeing has been relatively positive in the banking market in the last several weeks. I mean, Doug could speak specifically to some projects that were moderately delayed for him this spring that actually worked out to his benefit. I think
Right, actually, the interest rate that we started with when we got the bid was for 4.4%, and right now for this, it's in the threes. Like, I think it was 3.7 on Friday. So there's that possibility. That's actually a benefit that we delayed it until this one.
And I guess the related thing that I'd like to bring to the council's attention, just because it'll probably be part of our reporting going forward, is that there are a couple of really encouraging new financing programs that have been brought out at the state level. One from the Treasurer's Office, who has decided to extend a $100 million line of credit against a portion of the state's standing deposits on their pension funds to invest in Vermont projects. And they are looking for projects that have municipal support, that focus on providing housing, that have an environmental benefit, a social benefit. And when we look at what that application is coming into view over the next week or so here, the first round of applications is due at the end of this month. We think there could be a really excellent fit for not only the hotel and housing, but for the city to save some money on its financing by potentially looking at that as an option. So we're going to spend some more time kind of investigating that. And on a similar line of thought, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns has decided that they're going to make a similar type of investigatory investment of some of their funds in projects in the $500,000 to $1 million range. And we think that's another program where it could very well be a way for the city to save some money moving forward in their costs there as well. And again, potentially as a sub-benefit, something that we could help participate in sharing there. So just so that we don't scream gloom and doom here from the rooftops, I do think that in a backwards way, financing costs have come down, and it should help ameliorate for both of us, any of the additional costs that accrue from the extra work we've had to do to get here.
Thank you. So council, we have warned an executive session for this. We have time with Bill and Doug to ask questions. If there are more detailed questions for staff or about financing or something, we could go into executive session. Are there any
I can
other-
say from our point of view, Madam Mayor, we don't have anything contractually that we were looking for the session for.
Okay. Pure status update. Are there any questions from council about the project status for Garage or Hotel, or anything of what Bill and Doug have shared?
So when you say revised site plans, does that how does that or impact what was shared with council previously for, design plans? I mean, site plans being different from design plans, but has there been changes as well to the design plans?
No, the plans, the changes that we're talking about really are, in a lot of ways, a reversion of plans from the revision that was done a year and a half ago, about a year ago, to move the structural method of the garage back to where it started. So when you think about how the project is viewed from the outside, these are changes about how the garage is being held up and how the earth around the garage is being retained. They're not changes that impact sort of the shape and, view of the buildings from the outside. If we had, I expect that as we go forward, there will be, changes proposed as the design plans for the hotel evolve, but they would be something that would come to you separately and at a future date.
Okay.
So these changes that we're talking about now are really, they're technical in nature, and it's just a matter of whether it's less expensive to have the second floor of the garage held up with concrete columns versus, steel beams, things of that nature.
Yep, thanks. So with that, how does those revisions, it sounds like you're going back to steel, right? For what was proposed, some anticipated changes because of costs, and then at least for steel, the market's come down, so coming back to steel, is that right?
That's what we're investigating, yes.
Okay. So I guess with the concrete elements then, is there anything that will help with sustainability and operation maintenance over time, just to mitigate those costs?
Well, I think the idea was to constrain the discussion of potential cost savings to things that had already, to details that had already been reviewed and approved by the city. So, going back to 2019 and 2020, when this garage was, sort of designed and bid for the benefit of what at the time was going to be the VBIC project and the hotel, quite a bit of time and effort was put into the various maintenance and durability components of that design structure. And basically what we're looking at now is something that would go back to that level of, it wouldn't do anything to impact those discussions that were had originally. It doesn't mean that when we bring a proposal forward again, that the city wouldn't have another opportunity to confirm all those things. But I guess my point is there was a lot of back and forth that went into a basis of design for the steel already, and the working assumption that we gave to do was, you can look at alternative methods of structure, but you can't look at anything that would affect items of durability, maintenance, and operation for the city that have already been, discussed and agreed upon.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Bill, just jumping in though, I think, so the bid that's currently out there that's coming in is for the concrete, precessed concrete structure that we're waiting to see if that's still within budget, right? So
right. So at this point, that is the case, John.
Yeah.
The bid process that's happened over the last 3 weeks was designed to find out whether reaching out to a number of firms in Boston would change the bid response relative to interest in the post-tension, the all-concrete design. At this point, I don't have a final determination on this, but the best report that I can provide right now is that they are not expecting to receive any fully responsive proposals for the all-concrete garage design. The one firm that Dew spent a tremendous amount of time with over the last few weeks in Boston just became uncomfortable with the level of, or the hole that they had available in their schedule to execute the project, which was really early this summer. and the capacity of the project to be ready for them by then. So I think we'll know tomorrow, but I think for now, our working theory is that we aren't going to see a fully responsive answer that involves an all-concrete structure, and therefore we'll be focusing on, you know, what options we can bring to council to execute the project in steel. Thank you, John. I didn't mean to be.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I think, so that means there'll likely be some additional redesign costs to sort of go back to a steel structure, just.
So one of the goals that we would have for, one of the tasks that we've given to do going forward is to say, look, there's already been a significant investment of time and effort in plans, you know, as they pertain both to steel and concrete by the city, and, you know, vicariously by us for all the things that have gone around it. And the idea would be, I think, to have more of a design build type of component going forward, you know, such that the city would not be asked to advance additional costs for design in the absence of knowing that the project's going to happen, right? So and John, I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. The staff was clear with us that we've already exceeded sort of what we all hoped we would spend on design for this project to begin with, which just compresses the amount of money that's available for construction. And, you know, the idea was that we don't have carte blanche to simply presume that the city is going to be able to advance additional design costs here. So if we do bring forward an idea that has additional design costs in it, we would also be bringing you a plan about how those costs would be managed, knowing that the project is moving forward. So we'd be asking to effectively provide a guaranteed price structure we could work with that would include those design costs and would allow us both to feel comfortable with that direction. I don't have that direction for you tonight, but that's the path that we're trying to look at.
That's helpful to hear. So, you know, as Bill said earlier, there is no like contract change request. I don't think we need to do any executive session this evening. Are there any more questions about this status update tonight?
Sounds like we'll know more in 2 weeks.
Hopefully sooner, but we'll keep staff informed.
Hope tomorrow goes well for you guys.
Yeah.
Me too.
Thanks for coming in, though. It's been a while. It's good to hear how things are proceeding and how you're addressing these rising concerns.
We didn't mention it, but I just want to say too that we're quite excited about the progress of the housing bill in the state, and think that there will be some interesting workforce initiatives coming out of that we'll be able to utilize directly and quickly for the project as well, to increase the percentage of housing that's sort of workforce eligible. And I know you spent some time on housing earlier. I just wanted to mention that.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more
Thank you,
questions?
folks.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
Oh, was Doug saying something? I think he just-
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you all. So, since we will not have this executive session that was warned, we are at the end of tonight's agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Aurora, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We are adjourned. I didn't know.